Stephanie. Let's inspire passion for Italian American stories today. So, welcome to What Lights Us Up.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to sit down and have a conversation with you.
I'm excited for it too. I created this podcast because I wanted to share stories of others who have created passions greater than themselves that have literally lit them up. And I thought together and those stories can really inspire others that anything is possible. You have a podcast called the Italian American Stories Podcast,
Mhm.
where you tell stories of not only Italian Americans in the present day, but also Italian Americans of the past. What moment sort of inspired you to say, I have to share this story and I have to do it on a podcast?
Well, it's kind of a lifelong journey. I think I just didn't know I was on that journey, if that makes sense. So, Italian heritage. I've always been proud of my heritage. And then as I got older, I got super into genealogy. I would research my family, try to make all of those little connections. And then I would go through newspaper databases looking for my family. So I'd type my family in and family's name in and look for them. But I'd run across these articles of Italian Americans that I wasn't related to. I had no idea who they were. But I was like, wow, that's a really cool story. So I'd print it off or save it on my computer. And one day, my husband and I moved a lot these last few years. And I think I was like, what am I going to do with all of these? I've got these articles of Italian Americans that I'm not related to. I need to do something with them. And my first thought was a book, but that's an undertaking that I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready for that. And then it hit me that I could do a podcast. And so I would say if the one who really inspired me is my very first episode. Her name was Angelina Garamoni. She was an Italian in Denver. And she's probably, I think, the first article that I found. And she lived a little bit of a crazy life. She was a little bit of a criminal, but she just had such a fascinating story that she's my kickoff. Like if I had to write a book about all of these stories, I would dedicate it to Angelina Garibaldi.
I
So
I love that. I love that. And your voice is perfect for a podcast. I I know when I first listened to one of your episodes, it was one that you were narrating of someone that had passed. And I'm like, she has so much joy in her voice. Like it's making me so excited to like hear this story. And I'm waiting for the cliffhanger of the story. What do telling these stories open up for you spiritually, emotionally?
Oh, so much. Well, thank you for the compliment on the voice. I listen to myself, and I'm sure every podcaster does, and you're like, oh, cringe. Like, sometimes I feel like I sound like a preppy girl. It's just, but thank you. I appreciate that. It's huge. Just being able to tell these stories. A lot of them, I've done one story of my grandfather. I called him Papa. But other than that, these stories, I'm not related to them. And for me, the stories that I want to find are those unknown. So, in 100 years, well, and sometimes it has already been 100 years, their stories are buried and gone in newspapers, and maybe their families still tell those stories around dinner tables. Hopefully they do. I would hope that they do. But maybe they don't, or maybe they don't even know that those stories exist. So for me, finding just kind of the everyday unknown Italian American, those who came before us and settled and did something remarkable, that's what really gives me joy. And I hope that I can help families reconnect with that. I've actually had a family member reach out and he was like, oh my gosh, that was my great grandfather. I had no idea about, blah, blah, blah. He knew who he was, but he didn't know certain aspects of his story. So I think just bringing them back to life, bringing the person and their story, and hopefully just getting them out there, even if it's somebody who's not related to them, if they can connect to it and appreciate it somehow, and I find myself getting connected to to these people too, and sometimes I find a person who I think is going to, I can have a whole narrative arc and it doesn't work. But when I do find that and I can start plugging their life together, I get this like tingling sense and you find a connection with them. It's like honoring our ancestors, even if they're not our direct ancestors, because I think as Italian Americans or any ethnicity, you can look back and see the connections and the fortitude that even your family had. So
And connecting, I think we all want to create a connection. And that's absolutely incredible that randomly one story you shared connected with someone and their great grandparent. That's absolutely incredible, like sort of meant to be. I know when I've created this podcast, everyone I've had on has literally been I call them my soul family, like literally have helped lead me on a path towards more purpose, more joy, just sort of guiding me on my path. I feel like we all need guidance. And I feel like
Mhm.
stories connect us to the past, but it can also connect us to where do we want to go?
Yeah.
How has having this podcast connected you to your own roots? I know you've talked about it. I was just telling you how I was shocked that you've never been to Italy. Totally shocked because you have an Italian American podcast and
Yep.
you love Italian American stories, but you've never been to Italy. So how have these stories connecting with people who feel a personal relation to what you're talking about, how has it connected to your roots and what do you look forward to sort of finding out more stories when you actually go to Italy?
Yeah, so my husband and I are actually planning next summer. So hopefully, fingers crossed everything works out, we can go. I think I want to go back to my home, my village that my family came from. So they're from the Basilicata region, Potenza, Italy. And
Where is that?
so it's in
In
the
the
Basilicata region, way south.
It's way south.
Yeah, I think I can't remember like the region that's above it, but it's pretty south. Have you heard of
Puglia?
it's below that, I believe.
It's on the east side or the west side?
East side.
Okay.
Yep. Have you heard of Matera, like the city that's built in stones or built in caves?
No,
I'll have
but
to look it
sounds
up.
awesome.
It's beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful. So they shot like oh my gosh, what's the 007? A James Bond movie there a few years ago. I haven't seen it, but yeah, so it's way south. And so I'd like to go there and make that connection just because, you know, a lot of people from Potenza, Italy, they settled in Denver, Colorado. And so that's where my family is from. My mom was born and raised there. And it's interesting because you'll do those stories and it's very easy for me to pull stories about Colorado. And so many of them have that connection back to my family's region. And so it's neat to make that connection. You know, and having people I've had, like you were talking about, having people reach out to me, you have that nervous moment where you see the email and the subject line is the name of your episode and you're like, oh no, did I make these people mad? um but it's all been positive, which is great. But I've actually had people reach out and say, hey, would you like to tell my my grandmother's story, whatever? And that's a huge honor because they're trusting me to tell that story. So a lady who lived in Denver, she reached out and had me, gave me all of this information. I put a story together, one of my favorite stories. But I think you can find that human connection in stories, whether they're happening 15 years ago, now, late 1800s. What I tend to find is the human problems are kind of the same. We're trying to fall in love, we're trying to make a marriage work, have children, start a business, get to that next level in life. Just the structure around us has changed. You and I can have this conversation now online where late 1800s people couldn't do that, but it's like the human problems have remained the same. Obviously it's different in certain aspects with technology and social media and stuff, but it's just the structure, the setting has changed. And so that is really fascinating to me because I can read into these stories and I'm like, oh, I can relate to you, even though you were living in 1887. I get what this person was feeling in that moment. So that's kind of a neat human connection because, it feels so far away. And I don't know these people. I'm only reading them through newspapers, but I can feel that connection with them because, hey, we've all felt that.
Yeah, that's incredible. And how do you think it's hard, right? When we're going through everyday life and we're busy and we're in our head and we're going through our to-do list for that day. And we stop. And I think that we all can relate to this where we see a neighbor or we see someone and we're interested in stopping if we hear a story. Someone has
Sure.
a story about their day. Someone has a story about, oh my gosh, did you hear the news about this person or that happened? and we sort of stop. And so I think that's the curiosity that sort of piques us for stories.
Yeah.
And how do you think, but it's hard for us to get out of our own heads, I think. How do you think we can do better at connecting with the people and their stories in our everyday life?
In our everyday life, it's interesting that you say that. Especially with the neighbor example that you gave, sometimes, and I'm guilty of this, I'll come in from a long day at work and I see my neighbors and I'm like, oh, geez. And I just kind of want to bolt in, get inside my house. And I've stopped and I've thought, you know, 1930s, would they would probably have stop and have a conversation, and there was just such a difference in community, I feel like, back then. And so sometimes I have to stop myself and say, it's not going to kill you to have a 5-minute conversation with your neighbor who's walking their dog by your house, and you generally will find something interesting. Like they'll tell you about, oh, the lady who used to live in your house, blah, 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 blah. We just bought a house last year. So that's why I'm referencing that. But I think stopping and slowing down, and that's really hard for me. I work full time. I've got this podcast, family, all of that. And so it's hard, but I think just slowing down and realizing that maybe they're not somebody has a story to tell. They're not there to just take up your time,
And it could be fulfilling and relational to sort of connect, because sometimes I'll walk away and say, wow, I know them on a different level, or because I stopped and listened to their story, maybe it helped me on my path that day, that night, that week, whatever it is. It helped you maybe appreciating your house better or why you landed in that neighborhood. So yeah, it's interesting. Stories can sort of transport us, I think, into another place as
hmm
we're listening to it. And I know you're narrating some of the stories of the Italian Americans of the past. What is the creative process like for you? Because you are a teacher, right, full
hmm
time. So you're doing this on the side, and I'm sure it's not like you can interview someone like this in person. You're actually researching their story. How are you picking their story? What sort of goes through the process?
Honestly, it's like being back in college. Sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I've given myself homework. Um, and so a lot of it, I have a lot of books, I'll go through and kind of read, because like I said, I know Colorado really well. So I know the neighborhoods, the keywords to search for, but figuring that out in other states can be a little tricky. And sometimes I just type in key phrases on newspaper databases, Italian colony, and then I'll choose a state and a city. But a lot of times if I'm researching somebody and I'm going, if I see another article about somebody, I'll print it and keep it. So that way I have binders and binders of articles, but then it's putting their life together. And you have to be careful because the newspapers back then, as like today, they like to, embellish a little bit. So you have to keep that in mind. And then I use Ancestry, genealogy, Google. Sometimes I'll get on social media. I did this episode on, his name was Joseph Bona, and he was a mortician in Denver. And I had his story pretty much done. And I thought, well, let me do one more search. And I found where his great niece wrote a story about him, just a short little snippet. And it was probably the best part of my episode, where he was the mortician for Buffalo Bill Cody. And so it's a lot of research. And so then I compile the research and then I write a script. So like I said, it's like being back in college. Thank goodness I love it, because I couldn't do it if I if I didn't. I mean, I have like I said, I'll have like a script, sometimes scripts that big, or not scripts, research that big on
Wow.
an individual and a family. But it's so, once I get into it though, and I can see that I'm going to be successful with this person, I can't stop. It's so fascinating. And then you'll just start putting these key little moments and the lives that some of these people lived. I mean, we are blessed, in our day and age with our comforts and stuff. So yeah, and then my mom and I, so she's my co-host and we tell the story, but yeah.
Do you ever have someone that you're like you've never been to Italy, but you're planning a trip next year,
Mhm.
do you ever want to like go search for one of the people you've told the stories about and sort of try to walk their path or where they're from or go to the cemetery or
Oh, the cemetery. Yeah, for sure. I'm a cemetery girl. I could walk around
really?
cemeteries. I love cemeteries. Yeah, just looking at the names and the dates. And so yeah, no, absolutely. Like that's one of my biggest things when I go to Potenza where my family's from. I told my husband, I'm like, we have to go walk around the cemetery. And he's like, okay, we'll do it. But no, I think yeah, it's fascinating to try to do that. My husband and I we went to Leadville a couple of about 3 weeks ago, which is like this little mountain town in Colorado. And I had done a story on somebody there, and I actually went to the cemetery to see if I could find the gravestone to send to the family, but I couldn't find it. But it's fascinating to walk that and to look at especially, I'm in Colorado, so it's easy, but to like think about how these people got up 10,000 feet in the winter and to work in these mines. And it's neat to just walk down the same streets that they did. And it's a different connection than having a piece of paper and telling their story. It's filling their presence in a space, which is really powerful.
Wow. I went back to the town of my ancestors. So my grandfather was born in Italy. And when I lost my job 2 years ago, I went back, and my podcast guests have heard the story a million times, but I went back to the town of my ancestry in Italy where I have third cousins. It's the only place my last name is from. And I went back to immerse myself in the food culture of my heritage. And it was this incredible experience. I stepped foot in this town and you feel like you're really from there. Like it's this grounding feeling. I walked around the cemetery. I went to the commune and sort of to get birth certificates of my grandfather's parents.
Mm.
And then I walked around the cemetery to try to find if, someone was buried there. It's really interesting. So the cemetery in Italy is a very interesting fact. I don't know if every town does this, but this town in particular, it's a very small town outside of Caserta, which is outside of Naples. And they dug up, they ran out of space. So they dug up the old graves that were unmarked because back then people didn't have money to pay for their grave markings.
Yeah.
So they would contact the family if the family was still living in the city, but a lot of the people, like, you tell stories about, they've emigrated to the US so their families can't be found. They dug up the bones and I don't know where they put them.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know where they put them. So it's weird to think about that. And then if the family is there, they said, okay, well, we'll do a plot and we'll pay for a plot now, but God knows who they, dug up or how many towns that's happened to.
Yeah.
So it's very
Isn't
strange.
isn't that what happened with the catacombs in Paris? Isn't that one of the reasons
Oh,
that I just listened to another podcast where they talked about this, but I think that they were becoming like they didn't have places to keep burying these bodies. And don't quote me, I could be totally off on this, but I think that's one of the reasons that they created the catacombs was they ran out of space to bury bodies, and so they were putting them under the streets and stuff. So who knows, maybe there's some sort of a mass tomb catacomb in Naples. It's very interesting to think about.
it's very interesting, isn't it? And you don't realize it because we're just so used to like endless land and you just buy more land. And
Exactly.
that's what they do in the US, right? And the families that came here, we've stayed here.
Yeah.
Most of the Italians that came here, some of them went back, but some of them stayed. I have a so I have a great grandfather, his parents, his father died in Italy. And before they changed Italian citizenship, I was trying to get Italian citizenship
Mm.
through descent. And I found a path through his parents. His father died in Italy. His mother died here, but I don't think she ever became a citizen. And then they changed the law.
Ugh,
Crap,
so
I was gonna
close.
go and like hunt down all the documents, but and you could do that. And have you ever thought of helping people with their genealogy or roots, or do you speak Italian?
I don't. I mean, very, very little, like hardly at all. And so, no, I've thought about it. I'll have people have reached out to me and they're like, "Hey, have you ever found like articles in this town, and so I'll help them kind of find articles and stuff. I have thought about that though. It's just adding another thing to the plate. It's like finding that balance, like, you know, because the podcast is my love. You know, I want to keep telling these stories, and so finding that balance, you know, I'll help out, but I'm not sure I could add a whole nother thing to my
Yeah,
plate.
totally.
So, but it
It's
is
been
fascinating.
Yeah, and the whole roots, Italian roots has really been my passion. I uh, published a cookbook during COVID called Cooking with Italian Roots. So it's in honor of my Italian American family. And that's when it really spurred me for my passion for my roots, which, you know, inspired this podcast and then inspired this trip to Italy to go back to my roots. So it's been literally my passion to help people discover their roots. For someone seeking their creative outlet, they haven't found one yet. A lot of people are out there, you know, they're working jobs or they just haven't found, maybe their kids have gone off and left home and now they're like, okay, I'm an empty nester. What do I do? What's my passion? What do I want to do with my life? What would you tell them to help them find their path to what lights them up?
You know, I looking back at my kind of my experience, like I said, it was a lifelong journey for me, and I I always loved diving into family history. I history in general, right? But history, my family's history, and I think in the back of my head, I always knew that I wanted to do something with it. I just didn't know what. But I knew that that was my passion. I loved it. And then one day it clicked. Like, oh, this is what I can do with this passion. And so I think giving yourself, first of all, knowing what you love, and you know, if you have all day long and you could do anything that you wanted to do, what would you choose to do? And so knowing what you love, and then giving yourself the time and grace, I guess you could say, to allow yourself to come up with that process. Because I thought multiple times about writing a book about my family, you know, but it never felt right. You know, and even when I was looking at my stack of articles of Italian Americans that I wasn't related to, I ran it like I thought, okay, a book, I could do that. But it didn't feel right. And maybe it'll feel right for me in 15 years, 10 years, something like that, when life is a little different. But a podcast felt right, you know, and podcasts are huge now. And it felt like something that I could tangibly do. I could wrap my head around that. I could do that. So I think knowing what you love, and not trying to match what is out there and what's popular, because you know, like I'm a true crime girly. I love listening to those true crime podcasts, but they're a dime a dozen, you know. So how could you spin that? How could you do something a little different? And then just giving yourself the time to figure out how to put that out into the world, because that's what I needed. You know, I wish I could have started this back in my early 30s, my late 20s, but you know, the timing wasn't right. I wasn't in the right mental space
Right.
to, you know, tackle something. And if I would have forced it, it might have ruined it for me. So I think, yeah, knowing what you love and giving yourself some time to figure out how to energize it, like how to traffic that.
I do believe things happen at the perfect time. I think that things happen the way they're supposed to when they're supposed to. Same. I started this podcast later in life. I published a cookbook later in life. And it just all happened the way it was supposed to. So I do believe that. And more, it's like I'm gravitating towards Italy. What does that mean? And we're all always evolving. So I think that's okay. It doesn't have to be you find something and it's like, okay, that's going to be your passion for the rest of your life. But
Yeah.
it is creating space for how do we find more passion, more joy? For you, what has this helped you find in your life? Like speaking in the fact that you wish you found it earlier, what do you sort of wish you sort of knew earlier that you know now, maybe from the podcast, from finding your passion?
I think, you know, if I look back, I do wish I would have started a lot sooner, but I think all of the steps that I took, whether it was just sitting down and researching, joining a genealogy group, helped me get there. But I think if like the one thing that has helped me and has kind of pushed me is just being allowing myself to be out there. I'm a little bit of an introvert. I don't know, like I'm kind of a mixture, but just be getting that brave, like I can do this, like not worrying about what others are going to say, going to think, trusting your idea, trusting your process, your love. I think that that's been the biggest thing for me is just taking that, I guess, leap of faith is what you could call it. And just saying like, yeah, this is what I want. This is what I love. And I'm going to throw it out to the world. And if people like it, they like it. And I think that's been the biggest thing for me. But it's been easier than I thought it was going to be because again, it goes back to this is what I love to do. I love my first degree was a English writing degree. So, I love telling stories. I love writing and I love my family Italian history. And so well, it was like a little nerve wracking to start the podcast and get your voice out there. And then the whole video thing 2 years ago, I would have been like, absolutely not. But, here I am. But I think because you have that pushing you, your love, your inspiration, your passion pushing you, it's not so bad. And so I think that's another thing is just taking that leap of faith and going for it is huge.
Yeah. And like you said, like you cringed at your voice. I hated my voice too. I thought it was horrible. And then I would have people tell me, I love your voice is so calming. It's so light. It's so joyful. And then I'm okay, well, I guess my voice isn't so bad. I guess I could have a podcast, but I hate it. We all feel like that. We all feel like, oh my gosh, I don't want to cringeworthy. Like, I don't want to hear my own voice. I don't want to see myself on film. I don't want to fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And then your passion or your passion for something, your light for something is so much greater than the fear and
Yep.
the dislike that you're like, I can't not do this. Like, I can't not share these stories. I can't not share this inspiration because it's feeding me and my soul. Right. And
Exactly.
I can't not do it.
And I
So
think that's one thing, looking back, oh, I wish I would have started this earlier. I think as we get older, we have that more mentality. At least I do, where it's like, oh, I don't really care, like whatever. Where maybe in my 20s, early 30s, that would have held me back more than it does now, because you just get to the point where you're like, whatever, who cares? Like, this is what I want to do. We're 20s and 30s. I might have not been there, and I think that's one thing that we can throw up to, getting older. We get more of that whatever attitude in a way.
yes, it's like we don't want to get older, but then it's so great to
It's
just
so great.
the things that we know later is just
Yep.
amazing. And the people that we meet, I feel like I've met so many interesting people just by following my passion. So it's just been incredible just to do all of that. So
Yeah, that's a really good point too. I never started out wanting to do interviews, and I don't regret doing interviews because of that. I've been able to meet so many new and interesting people and just hear different perspectives. It's really cool.
you know what it's helped me do? It's helped me conversate easier with people and be more curious about other stories. And now, and really, it's helped inspire me. Like, if they can do it, then I can do that too. I started solo traveling because I've interviewed solo travelers on the podcast. And then I'll go around and I'll just talk to people that I just came back from Colombia and I literally had a conversation on Google Translate with two different people for like an hour.
Oh, that's
Like we
amazing.
couldn't speak the same language, and it could have been easily like, oh, we don't speak the same language, just sit there.
Yeah,
And instead I just sat there and had a full conversation on Google Translate.
that's so cool.
It was like technology, right? Like you're saying, like it's technology. We're having this interview on video, but it's still filling our cup. Like we're still connecting over our shared passion
Absolutely.
of
Yeah.
telling stories.
One of the benefits of our technology. It's
Yes,
so great.
totally. Totally.
How do you enjoy this solo travel?
I can't not do it now. I'm addicted. I went to Greece last year for the first time. It was absolutely incredible. And I mean, I loved Greece and a lot of people speak English in Greece, but I just did Colombia. It's always been on my list. I was
Mhm.
super scared. I heard so many things about it's dangerous. So I was waiting, waiting, waiting. And I'm like, I'm single. So I'm like, I'm not going to wait anymore. I'm just going to go. When am I going to wait for someone? And I vowed every year since I turned 40 that I would go somewhere new for my birthday. Otherwise,
Nice.
how would I see the world?
Yeah.
And so I've kept that promise the last 3 years, 4 trips. And so it's just been kind of like, I'm going to go and do it. And it's been amazing. And I can't not do it's been so fulfilling. And now so on my podcast, I had interviewed someone who did film and travel and had a YouTube channel, which inspired me to film my travels and food experiences. So now when I travel, I do, like, I went to a coffee farm. I went to like a off the beaten path local market. I cooked with locals. I cooked with someone in their home in Colombia and Medellin. And then I cooked with literally the hotel chef at my
Oh,
hotel in
cool.
Cartagena in the kitchen. So and again, it's going back to like connection, creating a connection and hearing someone's stories. Like the chef in Cartagena did not speak any English. And
Wow.
they actually had a translator come. She was the lawyer of the hotel, and we just became instant friends. And she was translating for us. But cooking is a universal language. You're
Sure.
sitting there, you're cooking, just like your family history is a universal language. Everyone has a story. Everyone has a family history. Everyone can find curiosity in their own family history and a relation to each other
Yeah,
by being open and curious and sharing a story.
absolutely. Yeah, I love it. I listened to one of your episodes and you were talking about being an only child. And I'm an only child too, so I can
You
completely
are?
relate to that. Yeah. So I thought it was really cool. Cause I enjoy my time too to myself. And I think that, that's something only childs probably, and like we kind of grew up that way. So I thought it was really cool that you did the solo travel.
Do you
Um,
feel like being an only child has helped you with this creative process of
I
the
think
podcast?
so. Yeah, because I don't have a problem being by myself.
Yeah,
It sometimes fills me up a little bit. I need that. I think especially with my job, I'm around children all day long. So I come home sometimes and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need some time to just myself. But I think being able to, because I have to hunker in sometimes and get a quote unquote paper done, I guess you could say. And so I don't mind that alone time. It, like I said, it kind of fills my cup a little bit. So
exactly. Sometimes I have social hour and then I'm like, okay, I need some time to just myself. But
yep.
the solo travel is great because I was so scared. As an only child, it's weird, very independent. I
Hmm.
was scared to go to dinner by myself. I was scared to travel by myself. It's weird because we do everything on our own
By
and spend
ourselves.
our whole childhood playing by ourselves.
Yeah.
So, but it little by little, I started to take myself to dinner, and I think it's been this podcast and hearing other people's stories, honestly, that has pushed me to do that. I went to a concert by myself,
That's
and I
cool.
travel by myself, and now I'm like, oh my God, why have I never done this before? I don't have to ask anyone. I don't have to talk to anyone. I could truly be present in the
Mhm.
moment
Yeah.
and really observe what is happening around me. And for me, that is far greater than being with a group in my bubble while I don't want it to ruin my experience. I want to
Yeah.
be present and really learn and immerse myself in the experience.
Because you can kind of go at it at your own terms. You can meet people at your own on your own terms. What do you want to do? And so that's kind of cool. I totally get that.
Yeah. So that's so funny. Well,
Yeah.
it's stories and connection and curiosity. I truly believe that. So thank you so much for being on the show, and tell everybody how they can find you, find the podcast.
Yep. So we're on all the streaming podcast, websites or whatever they are. Then our website is ItalianAmericanStories.com, and social media. If you just type in Italian American Stories podcast, you'll find us. So
Great. Thank
yeah.
you
Well,
so much.
thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed this.
Great. I'm so happy, and I hope everyone enjoys it, and go check your podcast out and to hear more stories, and maybe you'll find a long lost relative. So
Never know.
you never know. Thanks so much.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.